In this project I'm going to show you how to draw and paint this friendly seal, and we can also have some fun creating some texture on the rock surface as well. For this series we're going to be using a drawing grid. This will help me to show you how to get the shapes into proportion and positioned well inside your picture area. You will need to draw out a grid like this, 12 centimetres by 12 centimetres, and then draw 2 horizontal lines this way and 2 vertical lines this way. Each of these areas here should be 4 centimetres by 4 centimetres each. Of course you could draw your grid a lot larger if you want your drawing to be larger, but I think it's quite fun to work on a small scale, especially when you're starting out. It's a good idea to use cheap copy paper to do this stage so that you feel less worried about doing it perfectly and you can just enjoy the sketching. Once you've drawn your grid, you can then either draw it each time that you're going to do a new piece of artwork, or you can photocopy it several times so you've got lots of grids ready for each drawing that we do. The seal is a really fun little character, and we want to try and get the sense of him being nice and rounded and chubby. It's a fairly complex shape, but we can simplify it down into some basic geometric shapes first using the drawing grid, which is what I will show you now. Okay, make sure you've got a nice sharp pencil to draw with, and the first thing we're going to draw is the main section of the body. So really I want to draw an oval shape for that, so I'm just going to go into that central square at the top there and put a curved line like that to start with. Then that line's going to come round, curve right round, and underneath into those squares at the bottom. Come back up on itself to make an oval shape. Doesn't have to be perfect. That's the kind of general shape that we're looking for at this stage. We can make adjustments to that later on if we want to. And then the next thing to draw is the head. So I don't want the head to be sitting on top of the body up there, because the seal's head would be kind of tucked into the other shape, the rest of the shape. So let's just draw a circle to start with, and that circle is mainly in this top right hand corner, but it does just dip down into the square below like that. That's about the size of a large coin there. So you can see that one shape overlaps the other shape, sitting together there. And then the next thing I want to draw is an arm. I'm going to call it an arm, so you understand where we're going to position that. Now we know that they're flippers really. And this is really just an oval shape again, sitting there in front of the body. And then I want another one that's kind of tucked in down here, so just another oval shape down here. So it should be about the same sort of size, those two. Then let's come down to the legs, or the back flippers, and again the same thing, really just an oval shape, so it's sitting mainly in this middle square to the left at the bottom, but it just comes into that lower square there, so just kind of intersecting that line. And then I want to do another one that's kind of resting on that first one we've just drawn. So I'm going to do this one at more of an angle. just kind of eclipse that there. So I've got the main structure, and then I want my seal to be sitting on something, not floating in midair. So I'm going to draw a couple of shapes that just show, indicate where we could show that he's sitting on a rock. A couple of curved lines, so he actually looks like he's sitting on something. And that's all we need to do for the first stage. Here you can see a sketch that I did earlier of him, and you can see that he's got quite a bit of character in his face, looks quite jolly. So we want to try and achieve that in our drawing, so we need to make some adjustments now to the first drawing that we've done. Firstly, let's work on the outline so that we can really connect everything together. So let's put the pencil at the top there and bring it round the head, and as you do so, make a curve that joins the head and the body together, like so. And then take your pencil round, follow down and join up the head with the body down here. So you can see we've kind of taken away these two areas down here. So I think it's a good idea at this stage just to get your rubber and rub away some lines that we don't need. So we don't need the bottom half of the circle that we drew for the head originally, and we don't need that corner of the oval there. So let's take all of that away, and we can see we've got a much better seal shape coming through there. So just at this stage, it'd be a good idea, I think, to draw just a sort of circular shape round about here. So try and get it to touch this line. And start there if you want to, and do a rounded shape. It's not quite a circle, it's a bit more oval, but it sits just about on that line. So that's going to contain the features of the face we're going to put in there. And another useful line just to draw, these are just guidelines, is a curve that comes up over that shape and across. It's a very sort of shallow curve. If you just pop that there, so it's going to help you to sort of really see where to put the eyes and things later on. So we know he's resting nicely on this rock here, so we can bring this line down to meet where the rock is, so it looks like they're really well connected there. It's also a really good idea with drawing to sort of make sure that the lines that you draw start and end somewhere, so they meet something else, they're just not kind of hanging in the air. Make sure drawing look more purposeful, which is what we're aiming at. So let's go back up here, let's take our pencil line across, and I want a more sort of smooth curve here, so I'm going to take my pencil across and smooth that line over. So we're kind of taking away some of that original oval that we drew. I'll just rub that away so you can see which line I'm keeping. So it's made a much smoother line there. And what we can do now is I want to do the same thing down here really. I'm going to just remove the top of that leg there, because that really sits behind his tummy, and I'm going to adjust this so that the line of his tummy is a bit smoother, like the section that we did above. So if you do that and just remove that part of his leg there, it will look more like that leg is just tucked nicely underneath behind his tummy there, which then kind of brings this leg forward. So let's then remove what's inside that leg, because we don't need those lines. Just start tidying up our drawing a bit. So that this oval is now sitting right in the front. Now when you correct this part here and you're drawing this oval, draw it to about there and there, and we can lose that line at the top. You want to put a couple of dots there for yourself, it's quite handy, it just reminds you to stop your line. And what that does then is it makes it seem as though that leg is more part of the whole body, so there isn't kind of an outline that stops one from connecting to the other. And I want to do the same with this arm up here, so let's give ourselves a couple of dots again and draw, reinforce that line at the bottom but lose this part at the top. You can see how that again, that's become, they're all kind of connected there nicely. And then down here we've got the other arm down here, so this can stay as it is, but we want to lose that part of it there because this arm is kind of tucked nicely under the body. So he's kind of squashing it a bit, lying on it. Now let's try and give him a little bit more character before we develop any of these outside lines. On that little bit of curve that you put in there, little guideline curve, let's do a couple of dots for the eyes and really sort of sitting on that line there. So it's that kind of shape there. It's starting to come to life a little bit. And then this is going to be the area of the nose and mouth. So within this shape here, draw another couple of, find the central line first of that shape, like that. And then draw a couple of oval shapes on either side. So they're quite sort of egg-shaped. There and there. What you'll find is it leaves you like a little triangle shape up here. You can just shade that in actually, because that really kind of gives you the shape of the nose. Like so. And then in the bottom of this circle here, draw another oval shape like this. And you'll find that that's given him the right look for the sort of opening where the mouth would be. And again, what you can do is just shade in this section here so we get more of a sense of the 3D nature of it. And if you want to right now, you could put 3 little dots in there. Eventually we can do some whiskers on that part there. So he's looking quite sweet now. We can just add a couple of details down here. So let's just add a couple of, say like 3 lines here and 3 lines there. And the same here. Notice I've got just a slight curve on those lines because the shapes that we're drawing are curved. And he's starting to come to life. And the last thing that we need to add for him are the sort of ripples of chubbiness around the neck. So we'll have a look at how those are different from the smooth lines that we've got here. So let's think about what happens around the neck here. So we know this is like a really chubby area. We want to be able to show that. Let's use the outline that we've got here for the head already and just take the pencil around a little bit like that. So we're not drawing the full circle, we're just taking that line in slightly there. and do the same around here. So you can see that defines the shape of the head a little bit more. And then from there we can come down, take that line out a little bit, it's a bit more chubby, and then pull it in like that. So you've just kind of added that extra curve. And go back to the other side, and where this is a bit more bunched up this side because of the way that he's sitting, we can do a small curve up like that and bring that in. And then the same again, make a kind of curved line that meets up with the back. So we've got that sense of those extra folds there in the skin. So what we can do then is just tidy up our drawing a little bit, lose the bits that we don't want and reinforce the bits that we do. So he looks quite friendly now, and I think we can then, just when we're happy with the drawing, we've got everything there that you need, we can transfer that onto art paper and paint it. We can now enjoy drawing the seal through onto our art paper. So I'm using watercolours. So I'm using a piece of watercolour paper that's just a little bit bigger than my grid, roughly the same size. And just remember that if you don't have a light box to do this, you can try putting your drawing in front of a window on a bright day and it should shine through onto your paper, or you can use tracing paper. So we can just enjoy now really filling in the outlines that we've worked out. So notice with the eyes there, I've drawn them in a little bit more of a definite shape rather than just dots. And I'm going to do the same with the nose. I'm going to give him a more definite nose shape based on what I've already drawn. And I think he's ready to paint. So here we are ready to paint our seal. I'll just go through some of the things that I'm going to use today. I've got 3 brushes on the go today. This one is quite a thick brush, still got a nice point on it, but it's going to hold quite a bit of fluid. So if you've got a thicker watercolour brush, that would be quite good to use. And the 2 thinner brushes that I normally use, I've got a nice point on them. And the colours that I've got are burnt sienna. So this is a really nice warm but quite light brown. I've got sepia, this one's called sepia, but it's actually just quite a dark brown, so you could use raw umber or burnt umber would also work. And this one is called Prussian blue. This looks quite dark on the label, but we're going to dilute it a fair bit, so it's going to be much lighter when we use it. I've also got a little pot of salt, so we're going to be using a little bit of salt with our painting today. So it's a good idea just to get some ready in a pot so you can kind of easily grab it, but that's just table salt, or I've got rock salt here, but table salt is absolutely fine. And here you can see how I had a little try out with my colours first, which is always a good idea. So in this one you can see I used the salt to make texture there. So this is sort of graduation between the browns and the blues, which we're going to use on the rocks that the seal is sitting on. And this one much paler, you can see where I've used the blue and the little brown dots that we're going to see on his body. So they were my little trial pieces there. And I'll show you how to apply them. First of all, I want to use the blue, so I'm going to put a small amount of that out ready. It looks very, very dark there, but it does lighten up quite a bit. And I'll make sure my brush is nice and clean. A good wash in some water. And what I want to do is wet the area of the body of the seal, but not the rocks. So I'm just using this big brush, just with clean water, I'm going to wet that whole area. Just be careful not to go outside of the lines when you're doing this. So we want this to be quite well soaked, but not so it's running all over the page. See how I'm using, that's a really big brush, I'm still using the very tip of it for small areas, so it can be used in lots of different ways. It's nice and wet, just make sure it's still wet that end where I started. And so then I'm going to move to one of my smaller brushes. I'm going to dilute a little bit of this blue. You see how strong that is. I really want a very nice pale blue there. And then I'm just literally going to run my brush all the way around the edge of the seal. And as I'm doing that, you can see how the paint is just kind of blending in nicely. I haven't really got any sharp edges. So we want this area within here to stay light and just that blue tinge around the edge. Okay, so you should be able to just apply that and leave that to dry. So the reason we're doing that first is because the body of the seal is actually white, so they've kind of got the white fur on and the skin, but we don't want to just leave it white. Where things that are white always have like a little bit of a shadow, so we're kind of putting a shaded area all the way around the outside, and it starts to make him look quite three-dimensional straight away. So pop that on, and then just move to your lighter brown, not the dark one, the lighter one. Put a little tiny bit of that out as well. I've popped it down this end of my palette so it's well away from my blue. And again, I want this to be very, very diluted, so see how pale that is. Really, really pale, really pastel-y. And whilst this area is still wet, I'm just going to work a bit of that colour into my seal's face and just a little bit down into the chest area. So again, we're still keeping the main body colour as white, but it's just giving that nice natural look, adding that very, very pale colour there. And we're going to get that dry. So this surface is nice and dry now. I'm going to go back to my very light blue, use my small brush, and we're going to create just some areas of shadow, slightly, just to accentuate the folds of skin that happened around the neck there. So I'm just going to literally add a little shadow like that. You don't want to go too dark with this, you want it to sort of notice against what you've already put there, but not be too dark. So that's about right there. And then down here you can just take it down the side like that. So it's created a nice bit of shadow, makes it look more three-dimensional. So using that same light blue, I'm going to add a little bit of an area of shadow just under that arm there. And I'm also going to add it under here. So that foot is creating a shadow over that one. And then I want a bit more shadow just underneath the body here as well. So I'm going to start from underneath that leg there. I'm calling it a leg, but you know what I mean. And that's actually casting a shadow onto the body. And taking that round to there. So that looks quite three-dimensional. I also want to, whilst I've got that colour on the go, add a little bit of shadow just under where that mouth area is there. And maybe just on the underside of these parts that are in just above the mouth. So you can see how that makes those features start to stand out, come towards you, and then just get that dry again. Now we're going to use a couple of browns to make the spots on the body, the features. So let's get a little bit of our darker brown out. This one's called sepia. And I'm going to start with the lighter brown. I'm just going to do some markings on the body. I don't want to go too dark with this, so again it's quite light but not as light as the level that we did around the face. So it's about to there, and I'm just going to make some marks. Now these aren't going to be round dots, they're going to be kind of different shapes, so I'm going to use my brush in different directions to get those different markings. And to put some up really near the edge so they look like they go over the back of the seal. Some can be smaller dots. Just have fun with this bit. You don't want to go too many, but you want them to be sort of evenly spread around. Now, the next thing is just wash your brush and move to the darker brown. So again, don't want it so that it looks like black. You want it, but you want it to stand out against the brown that you've already got there. So just make another little mark over your first one. This is because the markings on the seal kind of vary in colour, dark and light brown. I might want to use that colour just to do use single ones. Small ones. That should be enough. Now the next thing I want to do is just colour up the ends of his feet and hands there. I'm going to do them individually. So I've got a nice clean brush, it's just with some clean water on, and I'm going to fill in one shape at a time. So I'm painting clear water over what I've already got there. Just going up the leg there just to that point. And I'm going to grab a little bit of the darker brown and kind of just feed it in from the ends. So I'm just dotting it in so that it blends upwards. Wash my brush out, squeeze the excess water out of it, and I can just blend that in. It's darker at the end and then graduates up the scale. And then we can do exactly the same for this hand here. So just clear water, making a nice wet area. Grab a little bit of the dark brown, feed it in from this end, let it just float into that area. Darker at the end. Wash the brush, squeeze out the excess water and blend it a little bit. then I'm going to go to this one. So it's clear water into the area. Grab a bit of the darker brown. Let it float up. Wash the brush out. Squeeze the brush out and blend it away. If you're watching this and you're not sure, because there's lots of little different things I did there, if you're not sure about it, then just practice that little technique first on separate paper. It's always good to, I always do a practice run of anything like this that I do before I do the finished one. So we've got one area left to do down here. So I'm just going to wet that there. Where the other leg was still wet, it's just picked up a bit of that colour, but it won't matter. Drop the brown in and just let that float upwards. And blend it away. And then get those nice and dry before we do anything else. So here you can see a little bit more closely what I'm doing. I'm going to paint the eyes and the nose here, and the little central line and a dark area just within there. So for this I'm going to use the darker brown. I'm going to use it a little bit more intensively than we did down here. So I've got my smallest brush with a nice fine point on it, and I'm just going to paint in the whole of that eye area dark. It's good to just try and be really, really careful with facial features. Bit done, and then the nose, which is pretty much just a triangle really for this. Little central line down the middle, and the dark area just inside there. If you want to, you can just carry that line round, give him a bit of a smile. He looks friendly then. And then just a few dots on the area where the whiskers would be. And then what you can do is just, whilst you've got that on your brush, is just go back to these parts down here and put in this detail using just some very fine lines with that darker brown. And then let him dry. Now I just want to add his whiskers. I'm going to do it using my brush. If you're a bit nervous about your brush isn't quite fine enough to do this and you don't want to spoil your image, you might want to just do it with a very fine pencil, and then if they're not quite right you can rub them out and try again. So the whiskers tend to sort of come downwards like that, so that's what I'm going to try and do now. I'll just turn. Get a good angle. Just a few, that's all you need to do. I'm afraid I did forget to mention earlier that I was going to use a tiny little bit of white, a thicker white paint. So if you have some of that, then we can just apply that to add a little bit of light into the eyes. So I'm just going to put a little dot there and there. You can see what a difference that makes. Maybe one on his nose, because that would be shiny too. And you can see how much that brings his face to life, which is nice. So this next part is really fun because we want to give him a nice rock to be sitting on. So we can kind of mix up a few colours, and you will need your salt handy, so just get that at the ready at the side. I'm going to use a bigger brush to wet the larger area, and my smaller brush to add my colours in. So you might want to watch me do this first before you do this yourself. So I'm going to just use some clear water, and I'm going to apply it into my area where the rocks are, making sure that I don't take any water onto the body that we've painted, because we want to keep that as it is. I'm going right up to the edge here. So I want a nice wet area for my watercolours to kind of float around in. Give it a couple of goes. And also this rock that's just in the background here, we'll do them all together. So now you can take the other brush and grab some of the different browns. I'm going to start with the darker one. Just add it randomly. Just you can see I'm just leaving a few areas to put another colour in. Wash my brush, grab the darker brown, using the colours a bit more strongly this time. So we want it to look a bit different to the body of the seal that we painted earlier. Just let those colours float around nicely. And I'm also going to add into there some of the blue that we had, which is going to mix with those other colours and make nice bluey grey colours. To make sure you haven't got any white areas left. Go up to your edges. And then whilst that's still wet, you can grab the salt that you got handy just there and sprinkle that over to make some texture. And then we really need to just leave that to dry for a while to let the salt do its thing on the surface of the watercolour, which is, it's going to kind of bleach out some areas there and give us a nice kind of stony texture, hopefully. We'll see what that looks like when that's dry. I've left that to dry, and I'm really, really pleased to see those lovely textures that have happened because we put the salt on the top. So once my surface was dry, I just brushed the salt away, and you can see where it's done its work there on the patterns, which is really lovely for the rocks. So the other thing is that we've kept the same colours in the rocks as we've done on the rest of the painting, so that makes it all work nicely together. and we just want to think about how we're going to finish this off. So I just want to finish this off by reinforcing the outline really. So I've got my pencil again, so just giving it a little sharpen, and I'm going to go around the outside, just strengthening the outline. I'll make the outline slightly thicker than the lines that are inside. This just helps to strengthen up your image and finish it off nicely. Let's put a bolder line between these two rocks so we can see that there's two there. Oh, bit this side to do. He's done. So I've really enjoyed showing you how to paint our friendly little seal, and I hope you've enjoyed painting along with me, and I hope to see you next time.